Outlast was one of the most influential horror games of the 2010s. The only game I would put above it is Five Nights at Freddy's, but even FNAF eventually caved and adopted the Outlast gameplay style. Now I should say, Outlast didn't invent its genre, Amnesia did at first, but of the two, Outlast was much more popular. So what is the Outlast gameplay style? Outlast is defined by your complete inability to fight back against the horrors you face. All you can do in Outlast is run and hide. It's a very different kind of horror than something like Silent Hill, where even if you can't technically kill all the enemies, you always feel a certain level of safety due to the gun in your hand. In the original Outlast, there is no gun, only a camera that you can use to see the monsters in the dark. There's a reason stealth horror caught on so much, and that's because the tension you feel from hiding under a bed or in a cabinet, while something that could end you in a second lurks outside, is unmatched. Now when you ask what games were inspired by Outlast, there are some very obvious answers.
Outlast 2.
I tried to avoid those for this video and pick out games you probably haven't heard of, so let's get into.
She was everything his father never wanted him to be.
What?
The Unknown Tapes is a pretty new game, releasing in December of 2024. It was made by Travertine Games, which as far as I can tell, is two guys. It's a dinosaur-based horror game, and this one is by far the most inspired by Outlast in this video. I mean, it even says so in the Steam page description, but it also claims to be analog horror. It definitely is not. I mean, technically you're not playing as the character, you're watching a VHS tape that the guy recorded. So you get the little VHS artifacts, but that's pretty much it. It's a little rough around the edges, but it's pretty fun. The horror of this game doesn't come from fear of the unknown or fear of something lurking just out of sight. When there's a dinosaur near you, you know it. In that way, it's a lot more like dealing with actual animals. If you're in the woods and you see a bear, the tension of that situation isn't in wondering what the bear could do to you. You know very well that it could easily overpower you and eat your face off. The horror comes from wondering whether it will or not, whether it's seen you or whether it will decide you're worth the trouble. The best part about this game are the dinosaurs, which serve as the main enemy of the game, and are who you'll be hiding from during it. The first one you encounter are velociraptors, who can very easily sneak up on you.
Seven to grocery. Oh god.
They have extremely poor eyesight but good hearing, so the way to avoid them is to stay in the dark and crouch walk. This game is pretty jump scare heavy, but what do you expect? It's a game about hiding from dinosaurs. The sounds these things make are probably the scariest part, as often you'll have to walk through these dense fields, hearing the snarls and growls of the raptors behind you, but having no idea where they actually might be.
Oh my gosh.
There's also these tiny dinosaurs. A note says that they can be dangerous if you meet a large group of them, but I never did, so I don't know if they can actually kill you or not. I should mention, I don't know dinosaurs, so I'll probably get most of these names wrong. Call me stupid in the comments if you want. Not all the dinosaurs you meet are an active enemy like the raptors. Like this guy, who I think is a Spinosaurus. You can hear him stalking you in the darkness near a lake, but a helicopter draws his attention away, allowing you to get past. This is kind of an underbaked mechanic in the game, but these smaller dinosaurs have no sight, but great hearing. That not only means your in-game walking sounds, it also means your microphone. A little display pops up on screen showing you how loud you are, and you can adjust the sensitivity in the settings, but on the base level I couldn't draw their attention even when I tried to. Moving up a level are these bigger ones called Allosaurus, which are basically just larger raptors in mechanics. As long as you keep away from them and don't make too much noise, you'll be fine.
Oh!
When you enter a school, you meet your first big dinosaur, these guys who are sensitive to light. If you shine your flashlight on them, they catch you. Outside, you meet your first T-Rex, and it's actually a situation like what I mentioned with the bear earlier. At a certain point you know that it's seen you, and when it finally does decide to attack, there's no possibility of escape. The only way you survive the encounter with the T-Rex is by getting lucky that a second T-Rex had caught your scent as well, leading to the two of them fighting and letting you escape. In the final area, a research facility, there's pterodactyls which you're supposed to be able to crouch to avoid, but they still get you sometimes anyway. There's also this massive crossbred dinosaur covered in fur that attacks you throughout the place. Finally are these big fleshy ones, which were apparently an experiment trying to make a biological weapon, some Resident Evil type shit. Despite that, they're the easiest enemy in the game as you can actually outrun them. Speaking of Resident Evil, that's basically the storyline of this game. Scientists recreate dinosaurs, at first purely for study, but one of them sees the potential for weapons in them, and creates the mutant creature we see in the end of the game. The mutant ends up breaking out of its enclosure, leading to the scientists having to evacuate, allowing the other dinosaurs to escape as well. And just like that, this small island community is now crawling with resurrected apex predators. It's not entirely clear who you play as, but I believe you're a representative with the company that funded this program. Your helicopter crashes down in a field outside the town, leaving your only chance of escaping the train that runs into the underground research facility. On the way, you learn of a contingency plan created by some of the other scientists, a gas that could be deployed across the island that would kill all the dinosaurs. So when you get to the research facility, you have to synthesize the gas, deploy it, then try to escape. But as it turns out, gas that's toxic to dinosaurs is also toxic to humans, so you die right before reaching the train, tossing the camera you used to record this whole thing onto the train, where it's then picked up by soldiers at the destination. The story is serviceable in the sense that it gets you out there to see and hide from the dinosaurs, which is really what this game is all about. Beyond the jump scares, this game isn't super scary, but it is very tense as you creep your way past the various dinosaurs. Like I said, this game is a little rough around the edges. You can tell it was one of the studio's first games, but it's fun nonetheless. I bought it for like $2 on sale, but it's only $12 normally. Check it out.
Gloria, how did you get in? The doors and windows have bars. We're trapped inside. Until now, I've had your keys. Your keys. You left them there on purpose until I found them.
I know who you really are.
Trapped me?
I missed you a lot, sister. A child's dream in REM phase, with open wings a moth is ablaze, and when his mother screamed that much, a blood-red death bestowed his touch.
Remothered Tormented Fathers is the pure and realistic survival horror video game. At least that's what the Steam page says. It was made by Stormmind Games and released in 2018, a studio that, I think, is from Italy. It was actually hard to find out where they're based. I'm going purely off a job posting on their website. I only looked into it because I was like, there's no way a studio based in a country that speaks English would call their game this. Like, what even is a remothered tormented father? Anyway, this is a third-person stealth horror game that has you almost constantly avoiding enemies called stalkers. There's technically 4 of them in this game, but there's also technically only 2, as you'll see. The stalkers themselves aren't especially scary. The first one is Old Man Felton, a naked old guy who patrols the house with a sickle in his hand. Not that I'm saying there's nothing scary about being chased by a naked old guy, but if you've ever been inside a men's locker room before, you've probably had a similar experience. The next is the Red Nun, armed with a big spiked sword. The Red Nun's mutterings can be kinda creepy, but she's also just kind of a normal-sized human. Next is Jessica, who's technically Old Man Felton. We'll get into it. Hey guys, her name is actually Jennifer, but I think I call her Jessica throughout the entire video, so But Jessica is armed with a nail gun, which gives her much more range than the others. Finally is Gloria, who's just the Red Nun but without the whole costume. By the time you meet her in Gloria form, she's completely blind. Alright, so if the stalkers themselves aren't scary, what is? Well, this game takes place entirely within a single mansion, and not like a Resident Evil mansion where it has expansive wings and secret passages. A pretty normal-sized mansion with 3 floors. The walls of this mansion are thin, and you can easily hear what's happening on the floors above and beneath you, which is great for tracking where the stalkers are, but that also means they can hear you. If you run for even a second, the stalker will hear you and run towards the floor you're on. As you explore, there's also constantly events happening that alert them, like glass falling off a countertop, or your character breaking something. So this means that when you're navigating the house, you have to creep around at a snail's pace, and when you do need to do something that'll alert them, make sure you have a hiding spot handy. If you do get caught by a stalker, you have a couple options. They don't one-shot you. They actually kind of act like they're playing Dead by Daylight. After they hit you, they kind of just stand there admiring their work for a second before continuing. You can take about 3 hits before the stalker will grab you, at which point you're cooked unless you have a defense item on you. These can be any number of sharp objects, but you basically stab it into them, stunning them for a second or two and allowing you to escape. You can upgrade defense objects to have higher durability, or stun for longer, but either way they'll only last for a couple seconds. Your other option is distraction items. Some of them you can actually set down on the ground where they'll make noise, and distract the stalker, while others you can throw. Throwing one on the ground draws the enemy away, but throwing one directly at them stuns them for a second. There's even a couple cases where you have to throw distraction items, like when you get attacked by a random ghost and have to break mirrors around the room to get rid of it. The best description of Remothered gameplay that I saw came from a Steam review, where they said that this game is basically like the part from Resident Evil 2 Remake, where Mr. X is chasing you, but that's the entire game. In that game, Mr. X is a giant blue man in a trench coat who stomps around a pretty large police station looking for you. You can't kill him, just stun him momentarily, allowing you to get away. The thing is, when Mr. X is first introduced, he's one of the scariest enemies in any Resident Evil game. Like, the amount of adrenaline you get from trying to outrun that guy is insane. However, as the game goes on and you learn the layout of the police station, it gets kind of old and formulaic, which is why Mr. X only chases you at certain parts in that game. He's not a constant presence getting in your way. The same thing happens in this game. Once you know the layout of the house, getting caught by a stalker is less of an oh shit moment, and more of a come on man, because it means you'll have to go to one of the various hiding spots and wait them out. There are still some good moments, like when the power goes out and you have to sneak to a generator while avoiding the red nun, who will obviously see you if you turn on your flashlight. Another good one is where you have to navigate this wine cellar, which is honestly more of a wine maze, to turn 4 valves. Jessica is lurking within the maze. The walls of the maze are super tight, meaning that if you run into Jessica, she will very easily hit you with her nail gun. The mansion that Remothered takes place in is also not very scary. It's definitely old and decrepit, but there's not really much environmental horror going on. Really, the stalkers are the only horror aspect in this game, and while avoiding patrolling enemies is entertaining for a while, it gets old fast. Now, Remothered is like, at best, a AA game released in 2018, so the graphics really aren't that great. Specifically, the character models are pretty bad. There's not a lot of voice acting in this game, given that there are a single-digit amount of characters, but Felton and Gloria's actors do a pretty good job.
Mr. Felton, is there anything I can do for you?
Oh, Gloria. Yes. See if Dr. Reed needs anything.
Oh, no.
May I offer you a cup of tea or coffee? Espresso?
No, thank you.
As you wish. How about you, Mr. Felton?
No, thank you. I'll keep entertaining our guest. You can go now.
You're diagnosed? 1958?
Yes, indicatively.
Rosemary's actress, though, did not give an ounce of emotion into this performance. Not that I can entirely blame her, as the writing for this game isn't great. There's constant grammatical errors and the characters frequently kinda just say things.
Do you believe in God, miss?
Well, it would be too easy, wouldn't it? I believe in people's willpower. Everything else is not God, but an aptitude or mankind's cruelty.
This is the kind of fairy tale I prefer at my age. When you're worn out from an incurable disease, you start having some doubts. Why is there so much life in such small but lethal creatures? An arbiter, that's all we need.
For what? It's wrong and crazy. It's human nature.
That thing
Conversation just came out of nowhere.
The story of Remothered is kinda crazy, and to be completely honest, I'm not sure I fully grasp it. So you play as a woman named Rosemary. We don't know who she is yet, but she claims to be a doctor from a medical institute. She traveled all the way out to Richard Felton's manor, supposedly to work on curing him of some kind of degenerative disease. Rosemary is refused entry at the gate of Felton's estate by Gloria, his nurse, who says that Felton is no longer a patient of the institute. Rosemary is undeterred and basically breaks in where she's met at the back gate by Gloria again, who refuses her entry again until Rosemary claims she wants to try some new alternative methods to curing Felton's disease. Felton lives out here with his wife, but we don't get to meet her yet as she stays in her room blasting a kind of pretty song on a record player.
The audio's fucked.
Gloria takes Rosemary up to Felton's office where the two have a meeting. Before Felton comes in, Rosemary finds newspaper articles documenting the downfall of Felton's company, Rosso Gallo. It was some kind of farm that had a coven of nuns working the fields, but Rosso Gallo was shut down after a disease spread out among the nuns. Felton accuses his business partner, a professor named Wyman, of spreading the disease, but Wyman says that it was Felton that did it during the testing of a new drug called phenoxyl. Phenoxyl is supposed to be used to treat PTSD, but it was never approved for use on humans. It becomes very clear here that Rosemary is not who she says she is, because rather than asking about his illness, she grills Felton on his missing adopted daughter, Celeste.
I know you've been trying to forget her, but this picture might help you to.
What is this? Where did you get this picture?
Isn't she your daughter? Celeste, or as you called her? Jennifer?
I asked you a question.
Back of the picture says Jennifer.
There is no Jennifer!
You thought I was stupid, didn't you, Mr. Felton? Do you really think I'd come here without knowing what I'm talking about?
You?
Or as he calls her, Jennifer. Felton insists that Celeste left on her own, but Rosemary doesn't buy it. She ends up getting kicked out by Gloria only to sneak back in, with the goal of talking to Felton's wife. When you get into her room though, you find her desiccated corpse covered in moths, and that's when Felton, wearing only an apron, starts to patrol the house, chasing you. After you find a recording of Felton being hypnotized by Gloria, he catches Rosemary, only to be interrupted by the Red Nun, who sends Felton running in fear. She's our next stalker and you have to avoid her until you can get into the attic, where Rosemary is knocked out by a blonde-haired woman. You wake up to the woman watching the news. A reporter warns the public of a crazy woman who assaulted a repairman, stole his van, and is now pretending to be a doctor.
A phone line repairman was attacked this morning in an underground car park. Surveillance cameras show a blonde woman in suit with an elegant, innocent air about her who approached the man with the pretext of lighting a cigarette. She could be no danger to you. The woman then attacked the man, wounding his head. The wanted person, aged between 30 and 40, then browsed through the man's briefcase containing confidential information about the users who asked for the phone line to be repaired. She stole the van and started driving to an unknown destination.
That's me.
Leaving the man unconscious. The authorities
That's
are now
me.
checking for.
The blonde woman points Rosemary towards a sealed up part of a wall, which leads to Celeste's old bedroom where you're attacked by a mirror ghost, a representation of Celeste's mom. We end up learning here that Celeste and her mother, Ariane, were kept locked in this room while somebody tried to hypnotize them into forgetting something related to the Rosso farm. Celeste ended up escaping but left her mother behind where she was killed by Felton. After the mirror ghost, Rosemary falls into the sewers under the manor, where the Red Nun harasses you until you can get into that aforementioned wine cellar. Down there you watch a recording that reveals that Mr. Felton is actually Mrs. Felton. This is kinda weird, but Felton was born as a woman named Jennifer, but her father wanted a son so he forced her to live as a man. And apparently Felton tried to kill Celeste because she reminded Felton of the fact that he was born as a woman.
She was everything his father never wanted him to be.
What? What?
I don't know, man, a really weird storyline, but you then see Felton dressing up in women's clothing, and now Jennifer stalks you through the cellar. When you escape the cellar, Rosemary runs into Gloria, who reveals that she already knew all of this and that she's the Red Nun. Gloria drugs Rosemary, but she escapes by throwing a vial at her, only to be knocked out by Felton outside. Rosemary wakes up to find Gloria cutting out Felton's tongue. Gloria then reveals that Rosemary was one of the nuns who worked on the farm, and they were all subject to experiments with these moths we've been seeing everywhere. So as I understand it, Felton was infected by these parasitic moths on a trip to Egypt. They made his muscles extremely dense and hard but made him sensitive to light. His business partner Wyman found out that combining the parasites with the drug phenoxyl resulted in better memory-altering effects, and he tested that on the nuns of Rosso Gallo. The only two nuns left are Gloria and Rosemary, because Rosemary escaped the farm by lighting the place on fire before she could be infected. Anyway, Gloria gives Felton an oil can and tries to get him to burn Rosemary as revenge, but you end up escaping and lighting Felton on fire. You have to flee to the attic, where you have one last confrontation with Gloria, who ends up blind when you open the shutters. The game ends with Gloria lunging at you, resulting in her falling out of a window. Rosemary spends Gloria's last moments comforting her, then heads back to the manor where she finds a lead on where she might find Celeste. Alright, I wrote that recap with a lot of help from the Remothered wiki, because while I was playing this game, I had no idea what was going on. I still honestly don't. Like, I think that Gloria hypnotized Felton into killing his wife out of revenge for what they did to her on the farm, but I also don't really know that. Also, what's up with Rosemary assaulting a random repairman and stealing his van? As far as I know, the game never explains why she had to do all that, like she couldn't have just rented a car. It's not like the repair van held any kind of importance to the story either, and she didn't use that to sneak into the manor, so I don't know. I also really don't know why Rosemary even cares about Celeste. I mean, maybe they had some kind of relationship due to both being on the Rosso Gallo farm, but they never really go into that. Remothered Tormented Fathers isn't a bad game, and I got it for like $7, but of the 4 games I played for this video, I would say it's my least favorite. Maid of Sker was released in 2020 by Wales Interactive, so you can probably guess where they're from. The game's story is based on both a novel released in the 1870s called Maid of Sker and a Welsh folklore story. The game takes place in 1898 in Wales, of course. This game is beautiful, but not very scary. I would describe the graphics as stylized realism. The thing they remind me the most of is The Outer Wilds, which is also a very beautiful game. Far and away the best part about this game is the music. A core aspect of the story is singing, and they knock it out of the park every single time. Spoiler alert, oh shit, but a big part of this game's story is a siren. And let me tell you man, if I heard some of these songs out in the middle of the ocean, I might be tempted to jump in. The voice acting is just as good. To save in this game, you have to use a phonograph, which plays a little dialogue interaction each time you do.
Abraham? Abraham! Where is that useless brother of mine?
Father, please! Please, she just misses Mother.
Abraham! Abraham! I'll be rid of this dog once and for all!
They're all fire, without exception. There are only like 3 voice actors in the game: Elizabeth, her uncle Abraham, and her father Isaac. Hey guys, his name is actually Abraham, not Abraham. I don't know why the fuck I thought it was Abraham. I even thought while I was writing, that's weird that the guy in Wales would have the name Abraham. I'm fucking stupid. But every single one of them kills it. You only ever hear the 2 men speaking in recordings, but you do speak to Elizabeth throughout the game. You can actually meet her in person towards the end.
Thomas.
To say that Maid of Sker is inspired by Outlast is an objectively true statement, however it's kind of like second-hand inspired by Outlast. See, what this game is really inspired by is Resident Evil 7, just without any of the combat. You heal by collecting little bottles and pressing R1, and the story is kinda similar. That being a man going through a remote and rundown manor in search of his missing wife, who sent him a message asking for his help. One thing that Outlast definitely did do, but RE7 did even more, is have your main character just fall through shit constantly. Like you fall through floors, walls, downstairs, all of it, like getting injured constantly. That happens very frequently in this game too, as it is a very convenient way to ferry the player to a completely new part of the level with minimal work. The levels you go through are kind of similar too. You start in the basement, end up outside, go through a mine, go through a garden. Like structurally, this game is very similar to RE7. However, if you've played RE7 and you've played any of the Resident Evil games before that, you know damn well that they took a lot of cues from Outlast. So all of that is to say that Maid of Sker is inspired by RE7, which is in turn inspired by Outlast, which makes it a good candidate for this video. Anyway, this game is beautiful top to bottom, but like I said, it's really not scary. The game has you hiding from these enemies called Quiet Ones. They're completely blind but have good hearing, which is a pretty common thing in these games. Fitting with the genre, for most of the game you have no way to fight back against the Quiet Ones. You do have this noise device that you pick up towards the middle of the game that can use fuses to stun enemies, but you end up losing it after an hour or 2 of having it. So what you have to do is creep past the Quiet Ones, occasionally causing distractions to lure them away. Pretty typical, but it could be scary if the Quiet Ones were actually intimidating. They're literally just humans who've had their eyes burned out, but you don't even get to see the body horror there as they have a sack covering their face. Adding to that, they don't one-shot you, rather you can take like 3 to 4 hits from a silent one before dying. That means that if you know where you need to go, and you know that you can make it there quickly enough, you can just run past the Quiet Ones. So yeah, the Quiet Ones are lame, however there's one major exception to that rule, and that is Uncle Abraham. I know I already talked about Mr. X in this video, but Uncle Abe is literally just him. He's a giant man in a trench coat who pursues you relentlessly once he sees you, and the entire time you're near him, all you can hear is heavy footsteps.
I'm fucked.
Abe patrols the entire 3rd floor, and unlike every other Quiet One, Bro still has his eyes. There's no hiding in this game, so if Uncle Abe sees you, he will chase you around the entire 3rd floor. This part is pretty well designed though, as the floor is filled with doors and little vents you can crawl away through to escape from him. It all culminates in a kind of a boss fight, where you need to activate this machine and lure Abraham underneath it so he gets shocked 3 times. That gives you like 5 minutes of rest until Abe is back on his feet. If he does corner you, you can use the sound device to stun him and get around him, and you might as well because you lose the device basically right after this. He's not a problem for the rest of the game unless you're like me and you forgot a crucial item on the 3rd floor, meaning that you have to go back up there, except now it's not just Ibrahim, it's him and like 5 other quiet ones. All of this taking place after you've lost the sound device, by the way. This game is pretty linear, as stealth horror games tend to be, but you have the overarching goal of collecting 4 of these musical cylinders. You find all 4 of them naturally through the story, but I'm stupid and didn't realize that's what they were until I found the last one, so I had to do a lot of backtracking. Anyway, in this game you play as Thomas Evans, lover of Elizabeth Williams, the daughter of the owner of the Sker Hotel, a fancy hotel on the remote Sker Island. Sker Island is a place that was only really important due to the lighthouse on its shore, until Elizabeth's mother, Prudence, became a renowned singer, drawing in guests from across Wales to hear her voice. That was until she died in 1894, leading Isaac and his brother Abraham to desperately try to teach Elizabeth her mother's songs, in hopes of getting people to come back to the island. Before her mother's death, it seems like Elizabeth was pretty much free to do what she wanted. When we hear the recordings of her on the phonographs, she sounds pretty young, but at some point she must have met Thomas and fallen in love, which I don't imagine would have happened on the island. Anyway, Thomas received a letter from Elizabeth containing her mother's locket, which plays the tune to one of her famous songs. She asks Thomas and 3 other composers to write countertunes to her mother's 4 famous songs. Elizabeth doesn't really tell Thomas why this is so important. Even when you arrive at the manor and talk to her over a phone, she asks Thomas to find the 4 aforementioned music cylinders and bring them to her in the attic where she's hiding. She says that with those 4 they'll be able to play a song on the grand organ in the main hall and lift whatever curse this place is under. Not far in you meet your first quiet ones, and Elizabeth still doesn't really tell you what the fuck is going on here. The way you find out is when you witness a man getting snatched by Abraham, then later finding him being turned into a quiet one outside by Isaac, who's a blind cult member himself. The ritual has them strap an outsider into a chair with 2 speakers hauled up to their ears, forced to listen to the song played by one of the music cylinders, the song being a recording of Prudence Williams singing the siren's song. They then light the person's face on fire, blinding them, and the music then controls their mind, resulting in a new member of the cult. Anyway, you learn what's actually going on here through the phonograph recordings and notes, but I'm just going to tell you. Long before there was a hotel on Sker Island, the island made their money by intentionally stranding ships using their lighthouse. They would trick an unsuspecting ship into crashing into the island's rocky shores, kill/imprison the crew, and steal whatever cargo the ship was carrying. This was not at all lucrative, as very few ships would even pass by Sker Island, let alone at night when they need a lighthouse to navigate. Everything changed for them though when a strange bird creature washed up on shore, a siren. The game takes care to explain to the audience that sirens as fish women is a dumb and stupid modern idea, because in Greek mythology they were actually bird women, so don't get that confused. Anyway, this siren washed up on the shores of Sker Island where it was imprisoned by Isaac, Ibrahim, and Prudence, Elizabeth's mother and the titular Maid of Sker. The islanders first used the siren song to draw ships towards their island, where they could strand and scrap them. The crew of the stranded ship would then be fed to the siren and the family would go reap the profits from their cargo. What a great deal, except intentionally stranding ships is a crime, and if they continue doing this for too long they would almost definitely be caught and punished for it. So the family came up with a new plan. Prudence would learn the siren's songs and draw guests into their island, where they could stay at the luxurious Sker Hotel. It's hard to say whether they ever had good intentions with this in the first place, as remember these people made money by destroying ships and killing their sailors, but at some point the siren songs corrupted them, leading the family to turn the hotel into a death trap. The upper floors where the guest rooms are completely lined with traps, and any guest that fell for them would end up just like the sailors, siren food. Certain people, it's not super clear who, but certain people would be inducted into the cult instead of being killed, like the guy we just saw. Prudence eventually died though at the age of 42, which seems young until you realize it was the late 1800s. Slowly losing their minds even more, Isaac and Abraham forced Elizabeth to learn the songs, getting the exact tune down so that she could emulate her mother's famous performances. Eventually Elizabeth learned what was going on and had the 4 composers, Thomas being one of them, compose the 4 counter songs to her mother's 4 siren songs. Thomas is a good boy, so he follows Elizabeth's lead and decides to go gather the 4 musical cylinders. Once you have all 4, Elizabeth asks you to meet her at the grand organ, and if you hand them to her, she says this.
Thank you, Thomas.
Oh.
There will be a place for you.
The fully combined siren song brings Thomas fully under her influence, where she compels him to kill the siren.
Kill it for me.
releasing its power fully into Elizabeth, where she will now try to conquer the world. When you play this game, this ending comes completely out of nowhere. Elizabeth gives you zero reason to distrust her, and there's really no explicit foreshadowing that she's under the control of the cult. However, there's another ending. Thomas arrives on the island with his counter song, a simple sheet of music. 3 more of these music sheets can be found across the island, and if you have all 4, Thomas will play the real counter song himself, getting you this ending.
Bring order to them. What are you doing? No! Thomas, you don't understand. We must... Thomas? What am I doing? The counter song, yes.
Somehow Elizabeth fell under the siren's influence, but by playing the counter song you free her and save the island. I fucking love the 2 endings because it relies completely on your own intuition. So what do you know that could lead you to picking the music sheets over the cylinder? Well, first of all, you know that the cylinders come from the brainwashing chairs themselves. You also know that Thomas came to the island with a sheet of music, though we know is 1/4 of the counter song. There's no indication of what the other sheets of music are, but you can probably guess that they're the other 3 counter songs Elizabeth had made. There's really only one problem with this, and that is that the dialogue prompts don't actually tell you that one will have you play the cylinders while the other will have you play the music sheets. I think that would have made it a lot more clear, but I still think this is pretty well done. Now, it's not like the good ending is really that good. I mean, the siren is set free and the island is saved, but all these people still have their face burned completely off, so I don't know. Maid of Sker is a good game. The soundtrack is amazing, the voice acting is great, the visuals are great, the story is alright, and the gameplay is mid. I have a confession to make, and that is that this next game really does not fit the bill of being Outlast inspired at all. To find the games for this video, I basically went on a bunch of Reddit threads of people asking for recommendations for games to play that are like Outlast, and this one kept coming up. So I bought it for the sake of the video, and I'm getting my money's worth, goddammit. Anyway, Madison is basically a walking simulator. However, I also think it's probably the scariest game I've ever played. Feel free to call me a bitch in the comments if you want, but I've genuinely never been so tense before while playing a video game. Which is crazy because aside from like 2 instances, you can't even die in Madison. Anyway, Madison was released in 2022 by Bloodiest Games, and it was also one of their first games released. If I had to give one game that Madison is actually inspired by, I would definitely say PT, although I think Madison is a lot less subtle and less confusing than PT. Anyway, I watch a lot of horror movies. It's my favorite genre, and my favorite genre of my favorite genre is ghost movies. I think that's because I used to be deathly afraid of ghost movies as a kid. Like, I only saw like 5 minutes of Paranormal Activity when my mom was watching it, and I couldn't sleep for days. The first ghost movie I really watched start to end was Mama, and it was in my 9th grade film and video class. So of course in class I had to act like the movie wasn't scary, but bro, I genuinely couldn't sleep for days after that movie. Since then I've seen probably hundreds of horror movies, so they don't really affect me anymore. Now Madison didn't make me lose any sleep, but there was a point where I was playing in the dark, and I actually had to turn the lights on because of how creeped out I was. Madison is a game about a possession, and the demon that's trying to possess you looks very creepy.
Ooh. Not really.
See, a core mechanic of this game is taking pictures. Oftentimes you have to take pictures of weird or out-of-place objects, which then transforms them into something you can use. However, for 90% of the game, that Polaroid camera is all you have. See, there's the Outlast connection right there. But what that means is the only way to see in the dark is by taking a picture and waiting for it to develop. Tell me that's not one of the most horrifying things you've ever heard. The best part is that 99% of the time in Madison, there's actually nothing there. You stare into that dark corner, swearing that you see something, snap a picture, wait for it to develop, shit your pants, only to see an empty photo. Except the one time there is something there, and that serves as your introduction to the demon of Madison. Her name is Madison. This game takes place in a rundown house, and yet unlike Remothered, the house isn't very big. It's a relatively regular-sized country home, and you're trapped inside that country home with this thing. You play as Luca, and the game begins with your dad trying to beat down your door.
That? God, answer me that! Your own family. Your own blood. What the hell were you thinking? What in the hell crossed your mind? What the fuck is happening to you? You've ruined our family. What am I gonna do now?
In Luca's backpack is a strange case with two pictures, one of an arm and one of a leg. Later, when you find his notebook, you learn that these belong to his mother and sister, explaining the dad's actions. You find recordings of conversations your father had with a priest, who warns him that a demon is trying to possess you.
In most instances, the demon's relentless objective is to get back to the world of the living. If you want to break that link, well, I'm afraid it's no simple matter. I could speak at length about various rituals and procedures, but by far the best way is to obey. Help the demon attain that which it seeks.
You find more tapes where the guy begs your father to let him help you, and to destroy the camera that you used to take pictures in the game.
But this perverse being is trying to go beyond even that. We are speaking of an ancient ritual, of which very little is known. 7 sacrifices, 7 mutilations.
7?
I believe we are facing a body exchange type of ritual. Madison Hale was trying to complete such a ritual before she was murdered, and now she is forcing your child to finish it for her. She is trying to steal your son's body. Call me
ritual?
as soon as you get this message.
Is that what she's after?
That's because the camera belonged to Madison Hale, a serial killer who lived in Luca's grandpa's house prior to their family owning it. Madison was either being possessed by the same demon or was trying to bind it to her or something by sacrificing tens of people to it, but her ritual was interrupted by a police officer. The cops shot and killed Madison, making the ritual go wrong, somehow binding Madison's soul and the demon to the Polaroid camera, which ended up being Luca's 16th birthday present. The actual game takes place entirely in Luca's grandpa's house, which isn't like destitute or anything, but it's clear that it hasn't been lived in for a while. That's why you never see your father after the beginning of the game. He thinks you're still hiding in your room, but unbeknownst to him, Madison basically opened a one-way portal through the wall into your old house. See, the thing about Luca is that this kid is in very late-stage demonic possession, meaning that Madison has almost complete control over what he sees. So Luca has no idea that he killed his mother and sister or what he's even doing in his family's old house. All he has to guide him are the strange visions in his head. To us, the player, it's clear that these visions come from the demon herself, and almost every time you follow these visions, it results in nothing good for Luca. The first of these points you to a red door in the basement. Of course, since it's a puzzle game too, you have to find a bunch of random items to open that door. While exploring the house, you just hear shit happening. Chairs screeching, doors slamming. Sometimes doors will even slam right in front of you, which isn't really scary, it's kind of funny. Like, fuck off, Madison, I'm literally doing your bidding. Anyway, when you open that red door, you get transported into your first, I guess you could say dream sequence, but also not really. There are these sequences that very clearly don't happen in real life, but they're still happening to Luca and you still need to escape. That's when you see the demon for the first time. Whenever you're in these alternate realities, you see the demon way more often, like when you get sent to this underground maze with only a lighter to light your way. That area leads to a graveyard, and when I tell you my heart was in my throat, it's barely an exaggeration.
This place seems abandoned.
Okay.
What am I doing? God. This goes down really deep.
Anyway, your first real danger happens when you get to a church at the end of one of these alternate realities. You can take pictures of 3 plaques to transport to 3 very different versions of the church. The 2022 version is a rundown dump, the 1987 version is right before the church was shut down, and 1951 is where the church was still in its prime. Your goal here is to place 4 colored candles in front of their matching pictures within 4 super dark mazes. However, once you collect the green crystal, the ghost of a Nazi in a gas mask will start haunting you. Now, I don't really know the lore of this church, but basically one of its pastors was a literal World War II Nazi. He literally ran one of the camps. It's not explicitly said, but we can infer that he was messing around with the demon, as many people would be hurt or die within the walls of that church. Adding to that, when Madison died in 1987, the church held a very respectful funeral for her, which, keep in mind, Madison Hale killed like 30 people. Anyway, once you've done all the mazes, you can escape back into the house and continue doing the demon's bidding. I mean that literally too. Like, look, Luca, I understand you're like 16 and the demon is in your head, but get this. Bro literally finds a ritual book explaining what the demon needs to perform the ritual and take over his body. So what does Luca decide to do? Well, our boy here decides to complete the fucking ritual. He places the necessary items on the statues, which will later be used to steal his body. Like, if I had to have one complaint with Madison, it's that they don't even try to convince you, the player, that what you're doing isn't the exact opposite of what Luca should be doing in this situation. Anyway, one notable moment after the church is this clock puzzle, where you have to go around the house and find clock faces that match the ones on the clocks on the walls of this room. This has you running all over the house, and Madison decides that this is a great time to randomly jump scare you over and over. Now, you would think that getting jump scared over and over for like 10 minutes would have made me numb to it. But no, man, she got me every single time. God, dude, come on. Anyway, before we get into the next part, here's some backstory on the Madison demon. So when it possesses you, you start to rapidly lose your eyesight. This doesn't really happen to Luca, only in short bursts when the demon gives him visions, but it did happen to his grandmother. I think maybe because Luca was a more suitable host or something, or maybe it was only Grandma's version of the demon that did that. Anyway, his grandmother was haunted by the same demon back in her day, although it took a very different form. The form we see might actually be influenced by Luca's grandmother, as it looks like a giant deformed old woman. Anyway, Granny bought a book for her kid, Luca's dad, called Blue Knees, a super creepy kid's book about a weird-looking gremlin that had both of its eyes fall out due to some illness. He's called Blue Knees because his knees are permanently bruised from crawling around on the ground looking for his eyes. Anyway, Granny read this book to her son once, only to find her belongings would start to randomly move around. She then started hearing something moving around at night, at the same time rapidly losing her vision in a way no doctor could explain. Grandma swore that it was the Blue Knees demon haunting her, but of course Grandpa thought she was crazy. It wasn't until after Grandma, now completely blind, killed herself, that the demon started haunting Grandpa as well. We can probably assume that the demon haunted Madison in the form of the Nazi ghost. Maybe there's some trauma there due to her growing up in that church. The demon took the form of Blue Knees to haunt Granny, and now it's using Granny's form to haunt Luca. Except actually the demon has decided to put on its old Blue Knees costume and make Luca play a little game. You have to go around to various gramophones and listen to Blue Knees' creepy-ass theme song, hoping that an eye will pop out of it. You have to collect 2 of these eyes. Blue knees will appear at various times to chase you around the house.
God.
You have to snap a picture of him just before he gets you, otherwise he just kind of teleports you back to the child's bedroom. In my personal opinion, I think Blue Knees is way less scary looking than the grandma form, but whatever. After Blue Knees attacks Luca anyway, you have to limp back to the ritual room where Luca sets everything up and ends the game. You end the game by placing Madison Hale's ashes on a pedestal, then Luca hangs himself, which if you read the ritual book was the last step in the demonic possession process, meaning that Madison, or whatever demon she was trying to control, now has full control over a 16-year-old boy and is free to sow chaos in the world. The ending is kind of baffling until you fully come to terms with the fact that Luca was like 90% of the way possessed anyway. The demon could control what he sees, hears, and thinks, so it was able to get him to finish the ritual for it. So that was Madison. I put it last because I figure if you got this far into the video, you probably don't remember what the original premise was, so I can get away with including a game that really has nothing to do with Outlast. So in this video we talked about 4 games. The Unknown Tapes is definitely a game made by 2 people, but it's a fun game about hiding from dinosaurs. Remothered Tormented Fathers has a super weird name and a super weird story, and the gameplay doesn't really make up for those facts. Maid of Sker has some beautiful vocals in it, great visuals but kinda mid gameplay, and Madison has very little in common with Outlast, however it's a great horror game that you should check out. Thank you all so much for watching.